Negotiations between the United States and Cuba to normalize relations that had broken off in 1961. There was rejoicing in the streets of Havana today, people honking horns, children parading in the street. This is seen almost universally here as a great boon. A boon to their economy and an opportunity to reunite families that have been separated for more than a generation. With the details of today's dramatic announcement, we'll go to our chief White House correspondent, Major Garrett.
I am convinced that through a policy of engagement, we can more effectively stand up for our values and help the Cuban people help themselves as they move into the 21st century.
It started this March with a meeting between President Obama and Pope Francis at the Vatican. The president then authorized direct talks with Cuba about the release of U.S. aid worker Alan Gross and the potential opening of diplomatic relations with the Castro regime. White House advisors Ben Rhodes and Ricardo Zuniga, seen here conferring in the Oval Office, met secretly with Cuban officials in Ottawa, Canada in June 2013. A series of talks led to a final meeting with top Catholic officials at the Vatican in October. In a 45-minute phone call with Castro from the Oval Office Tuesday, President Obama finalized the release of Gross and a prisoner swap. It was the first substantive phone conversation between a U.S. president and a Cuban leader since the Cuban Revolution in 1959. The U.S. released 3 members of a spy network known as the Cuba-Fin. In exchange, the Castro regime released an unnamed Cuban national who had served 20 years in jail for working as a U.S. spy.
This man, whose sacrifice has been known to only a few, provided America with the information that allowed us to arrest the network of Cuban agents that included the men transferred to Cuba today, as well as other spies in the United States.
The U.S. will now review Cuba's designation as a state sponsor of terrorism. Cuban Americans will be able to send more money to family in Cuba, and U.S. credit and debit cards will soon be accepted there. In Havana, Castro acknowledged the historic breakthrough. He said, "The progress made in our exchanges proves that it is possible to find solutions to many problems." The U.S. will build an embassy in Havana, and the administration is already lifting certain travel and trade restrictions with Cuba. But, Scott, only Congress can fully eliminate all commercial barriers between the two countries, and the White House admits that will be an uphill political battle.
Major, thank you very much. Alan Gross was held here in Cuba for more than 5 years. And with more on his story, we go to our State Department correspondent, Margaret Brennan.
An elated Alan Gross was mobbed by well-wishers after landing just outside Washington, D.C. A devout Jew, Gross later told reporters he felt blessed.
Today is the first day of Hanukkah, and I guess so far it's the best Hanukkah that I'll be celebrating for a long time.
The former government contractor said he didn't believe it when his lawyer called yesterday to say his 5-year ordeal was coming to an end. But just before 9 a.m. today, the U.S. government plane carrying him and wife Judy crossed into American airspace, making him a free man. Maryland Democrat Chris Van Hollen was on board.
When we were gathered on the airplane and we crossed into U.S. airspace,